Thank you all. I know that to Laurie and Joe and Carol, I'll introduce you all in a moment. The people on this call are a dedicated crew of part of a larger crew. Some people who had to drop off the last minute because of Zoom memorial services and things like that. We have a wonderful team called Hands of Chesed. Hey, Lois. Which has just been phenomenal. It's been around for a lot of years, but has really taken up in the last bunch of months. Perhaps no surprise because of COVID. Lois is in our bottom corner, and Lois has done lots of incredible things over the years, feed the homeless and senior connections. Many of the people on this have been officially, hey Jamie, have been officially making calls to our members, whether it's been their board of trustees or their youth and family board committee roles, or they're women of NSCI or brotherhood, or just because they're good humans and they reach out to people who can help. So it seemed really like the best thing we could do, which is to increase everyone on this call is super wonderful and making people at home, but I feel like we could all up our game in terms of having the ability to do what we do better as we reach out to members of our community. To my NSCI friends, and it's great to have you all in one place. I'm really thrilled to welcome Rabbi Dr. Joe Ozarowski, who is Joe's a rabbinic counselor and chaplain for JCFS, wears many hats, and an adjunct professor at Spertus. Wow, you were one of the top Jewish Chicagoans in 2013. I do recall that Rabbi Joe received the Mordecai Simon Award from the Chicago Board of Rabbis. And if anyone knew Rabbi Simon, you know that that is an honor. It's an inimitable honor. Rabbi Simon was a mensch among mensches and an incredible leader in our community. Rabbi Ozarowski is a board certified chaplain, and he is the recently elected and now officially in office president of Neshama, the Association of Jewish Chaplains. And to be a board certified chaplain is an incredible amount of professional training and work and supervision. And I've watched my classmates with great awe. So. And I welcome Laurie Garber-Amram, and I was blessed to study with Laurie a few years ago with her work with Orot, as she led a Jewish professionals group. Laurie has a master's in social service administration, has worked as a psychotherapist in private practice for 25 years, and she became certified as a Jewish mindfulness meditation instructor through Orot, which is how I've gotten to know and work with Laurie, and I'm really grateful. And she's co-taught a program for learning mindfulness and compassion through a Jewish lens. She works as a grief and mental health therapist, health specialist on the community services team at JCFS. I'm really grateful, Laurie and Joe, that you're with us to teach us and to lead. And while Carol Brumer-Glickson is here as leading our tech, she is also on the phenomenal team of JCFS, and we've known each other for many years. So thank you to all of you for being here to teach us and lead us. What I'm going to really turn everything over to you all. I just want to say to our NSCI folks, we'll have, I hopefully have some time at the end for questions. We are recording this. We will share the recording with others, but we can cut it off before questions. If people have questions that, we don't want to put that out, we'll just take the main part of the recording. So the questions at the end. And I just want to say thank you for all you do, all you have done, and I know all you will do, knowing everyone who's on this call. So thank you, Joe and Laurie. Turn it to you.
Thank you so very, very much on behalf of Laurie and Carol and myself. Thank you to Rabbi Green, first of all, for that wonderful, amazing introduction. And thank you for facilitating this and being partners at North Shore Congregation Israel with JCFS. We have a very robust synagogue partnership program, and we are really honored and proud to be partnered with North Shore Congregation Israel to provide the various services that we provide to your synagogue, and this is one of them. So we're happy to offer this training to you. The training itself, the origin of the training, of course, goes back to something that we have been doing for 20 years and are still doing, which is a much more extensive Bikur Cholim committee training, and we can still offer that. I don't think we've ever done it at North Shore Congregation Israel, but we could. But when COVID broke out, we realized very quickly there was a need to come up with something based on that, but a little bit different, because we had to offer it this way by Zoom, by phone, and to offer a wellness screening type of training also by phone, because we weren't getting together, and we're still not getting together in so many ways. So, and I thank Rabbi Green for the commentary there. So we offered this training, Caring Conversations. It is a training to allow you and help you do wellness checks and other checks within your own congregation, probably by phone or by other means as well. Like I say, it's a 1-hour training, and there are longer trainings for more involved visits, which we can talk about at some other time. But we're so glad that you're here. We're glad to be here with you. We have a number of things we're going to be doing in the next 60 to 70 minutes or so. And the first thing is we're going to study some Torah together. I have 2 classic texts that I'm going to be teaching. And I want to mention that while I'm teaching, it will be hard for me to see if anybody actually raises their hand, although I don't mind conversation and I'm happy to have questions. So I will try to keep an eye on it while I have the text on the screen, and Carol's going to give me that momentarily. But please feel free to use the chat to raise issues, because I do get to see that. And the funny thing about teaching by Zoom is the idea of using the chat, and having taught at various levels over my career, elementary, high school, college, and postgrad. The fun thing about using the chat is that it's like when students are passing notes to each other in class, but you get to read the notes while they're going on. It's really a lot of fun. So please feel free to do that. So we're going to study 2 pieces of Torah that actually tie into the clinical and practical part of our training. So Carol,
I will put that up in just a minute. I'm going to disappear. My photo is going to disappear so that I'm not distracted. You can also reach me in the chat if you need to. I just want to preface this by saying I literally learned how to do this today. So there may be a few things that don't go 100%, and I ask for your patience while we get through that. And if there's guidance that we need or need another minute to shuffle to get on, please be patient. Thank you. All right, just a minute. Can you see?
Can you see the text?
Yeah, do you see it? Bikur Cholim by phone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
This is the original version of what we did last year, and it's the same. The Midrash and the Talmud don't change. So I'm going to be, we have the Hebrew and the English. I'm going to be doing it mostly in English for a couple reasons. Partly to save time. We have a lot to cover. And partly because I'm assuming that many people may not have the Hebrew background, but I am going to be referring to the Hebrew a little bit. Okay. This is a classic piece of Midrash. It's the Midrash Rabbah in Leviticus Rabbah. Midrash, for those of you who may not be aware, is a rabbinical commentary on the Torah. There are lots of rabbinical commentaries on the Torah. Midrash, this particular Midrash goes back about 1,500 years, I would say, and it's based not on the laws of the Torah, but on the narratives of the Torah. This is one of my favorites, and you'll understand why in just a minute. This is the comment of Rav Huna. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna said, whoever visits the sick lessens, the Hebrew is pochtin, takes away, lessens a 60th of the illness. Now, before we go on, the term 60th is found in other places too. Some of you might recognize it. If anybody's ever kept a kosher home or has had a relative that has kept a kosher home, you may know that we don't mix milk and meat. But that means that if you are somehow making a nice, delicious chicken soup for your Friday night dinner with matzo balls and all sorts of other good stuff, and a little bit of milk falls into the soup, and oh my God, I lost the soup. Actually, maybe you didn't lose the soup. It all depends. If there is 60 times the amount of milk in the soup is still kosher. So 60th, you find it in a number of different places. The 60th, I would term a rabbinic fraction. It finds its way into rabbinic literature in a lot of places. It's a minimum fraction. In computerese, we call it a byte. So one who visits the sick takes away or lessens a 60th of the illness. So you'll forgive me if I lapsed into my yeshiva sing-song, because that's how I was trained to study rabbinic literature. So Utve Rav Huna, they asked Rav Huna, if so, and I'm going to read this part in the Hebrew, Yalu Shishim v'Yered Imaim Lashuk. Let 60 people come and visit, and they'll all go to the mall together. I mean, the Hebrew word is market, but it's the mall. It's Northbrook Court. It's downtown Highland Park. It's downtown Glencoe. That's what it means. So in other words, if it takes away a 60th and you get 60 people, 60 times a 60th, so the person's recovered, right? So he answers them 60. No, that's not exactly what it means. What it means, and again, I'm going to refer to the Hebrew here, ubilvad shu oavin oto kenafsho. It only works, this trick that visiting the sick takes away some of the illness, only works if the patient loves the visitor, if the visitor loves the patient as they love their own souls. That may ring a bell with many of you. The term to love someone as you love your own soul. Anybody recognize that? Where does that come from? Anybody know? It's from the Torah. It's from Leviticus. It's chapter 19. It's the holiness code, loving your neighbor as you love yourself. That's clearly a reference to it. So in other words, the visit doesn't work unless the visitor has what we call an empathic relationship. They love them as they love themselves. We're going to talk more about what that means a little bit later on. Laurie has some material that she's going to share with you on that. But even without this, the visit helps. Okay, so this is one of the classic texts of Bikur Cholim, of visiting the sick. Now, before I go further, I need to give a couple of definitions here, because visiting the sick is something that has been a part of Jewish tradition for a couple thousand years. It's in the Torah. We're going to see the case in the Torah in just a moment. But when we developed this training 2 years ago, just as COVID had broken out, actually 2 weeks after synagogue started to close up in March, we got our first request for Anshe Emet. And we realized that to do this training right, we had to redefine Bikur Cholim. We had to define the Hebrew word bikur, which means a visit, and we had to redefine cholim. We had to redefine illness, because the people that we're visiting were not going into a hospital or a skilled nursing facility to visit people. We're not even allowed to do that anymore. And someone who's sick, the people we're taking care of may be sick in the classical sense, but they might not be. They might be lonely. They might be by themselves. They might be frustrated, as you will see. We're going to cover this a little bit later on. They might be a lot of things, but it might not be a classic visit. It might be a phone call. It might be on this technology called Zoom, which Rav Huna in the time of the Midrash did not know about, I assure you. And it might not be someone who is sick. It might be somebody who is having other things that they're enduring. So we have to redefine the Talmudic and rabbinic terminology, but I think the values still fit. The training that we're going to be offering you tonight will help you take away a 60th of the illness. I have to tell you something, the data is all there. If you go to the research that's being done in places like Duke University, at the Harvard Mind, Body, Spirit Institute, the National Institutes for Health are doing this, that actually the connection to a spiritual or social community actually plays a role in the healing process and in the wellness process. So even though we may not be calling people who are ill, it may not be cancer or a heart or a stroke or the classical cases that we visited, it may be something a little bit different. We are saving lives, we are enhancing lives, we are healing people, and that mitzvah is what you will be doing soon within your own community. And for that, you really deserve a hearty, as we say in Hebrew and Yiddish, Yasher Koach, more power to you, or in Hebrew, Kol HaKavod, all the honor goes to you. Okay, any questions or thoughts about this text before we continue? Okay, if not, we're going to go to the second text. Now, I mentioned that there was an example of visiting the sick in the Torah. This is it. This is Genesis chapter 18. God visits Abraham. I don't know if anybody remembers why God visited Abraham, but I'll tell you the answer. It's because Abraham brised himself. He circumcised himself. The chapter right before this is God's commandment to Abraham to have a bris for himself and his son Yishmael, and that's one of the roots of circumcision in Judaism. Bris comes from here. Now, Abraham was about 99 years old, and a bris is a pretty painful operation for a 99-year-old gentleman. So Abraham is busy resting in his tent, or outside his tent, and God pays him a bikur cholim, a visiting the sick call. Let's look at the text. Vayira'ilav Hashem be'elonei Mamre, and God appears to Abraham in the terebinths of Mamre. I never knew what a terebinth was. It's a tree of some sort. In modern Hebrew, an alon is an oak tree, but I'm not sure a terebinth is an oak, and it's not important for our conversation. But that's how it's translated here. So God appears to Abraham by the terebinths of Mamre as he sat in the tent door of the heat of the day. Then Abraham lifts his eyes and looks up, and these three individuals are standing above him. Now, the three individuals we learn later are angels, but we don't know that at this point. They're called people. Abraham assumes they're people, and Abraham welcomes them, and there's a whole narrative that's not part of what we're doing tonight that comes afterwards. But the first part of the visitors coming to Abraham is a part of it. Let's go to the last text. This is another Midrash Tanhuma, which is a direct commentary on our text. All right. When God revealed God's self, Kevan Shenigla Alav, when God revealed God's self, the Holy One stood and Abraham sat, as it says in the first verse, and he was sitting in the doorway. Abraham was sitting in the doorway of his tent. So in rabbinic thinking, if Abraham was sitting, God must have been standing, as it were. I mean, God is God. God's not human. So, but the text is kind of using human terminology to describe God's actions. Let's go on. It's the custom of the world that when a student is sick and a teacher comes to visit, there's other students. In Hebrew, the word is shlichut harav. There's an entourage of the students that come first and say, shlichut harav leveto shechaleh. There's a delegation of the student. They announce there's a delegation of the teacher. The Rebbe is here to visit. The Rav is here to visit. There's a delegation here to visit the patient, meaning that the teacher wants to visit the student. This is my translation, by the way. I did all the translations here. Okay? Bakadosh Baruch Hu Einu Kain, says the Hebrew. Not so the Holy One. That's not how God operates. When Abraham was circumcised, when Abraham brised himself and was in pain from circumcision, the Hebrew word is mitztaer. He was in pain. It's a painful operation. God told the messengers to go and visit. God says, my buddy Abe down there is having a tough time following my instructions, and he's in real pain. Could you pay my buddy Abe a call, God says to the angels. But let's finish up the Midrash, third line from the bottom. But before they arrived, God came in first. The Hebrews, Kedamana Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One comes in first. He beats out the angels. God beats out her angels, okay? As the Torah says in verse 1, and God appears to him, meaning Abraham. And only after that, in verse 2, does Abraham lift his eyes and see the three guys, the three people who are there for him. Is there no greater humble one than this? There are a number of things that we learn from this midrash. One is the last line is key. It's the humility. God is God. God's out there. God's God. God rules the universe. God, thunder and lightning. And no, actually, that's not the midrashic view of God. God is humble. God comes in with humility. That's number one. Number two, it is not beneath the Holy One to visit one of God's children on earth. In other words, it's not beneath God to come down and talk to buddy Abe and comfort Abe. And the third message is one that I would ask you. What does God say to Abraham? And I want to give it over to Laurie in just a second and finish up my piece of this. But I'll tell you this, it's a trick question, because the answer is, if you read both the text in the Torah and the Midrash carefully, God doesn't say anything to Abraham. There's no dialogue here. It's God's presence that offers the comfort and consolation and healing that the visit brings. It's the presence. God doesn't say, God's just there. God doesn't say anything. That's why it's a trick question. Now, when you would be talking about the specifics of the calls and the visits you'll be making, you can't just go on the phone and go, you got to say something. You have to introduce yourself. But the point that the Midrash is leaving us with is that the dialogue, even at a phone call, it's even more important than it is in a personal visit. But in the end, it's your presence. And we're going to give you some tips as to how to convey your presence over the phone, where it's much harder to do when you're not with the person in the same room and maybe can't even see them. And That's the wisdom of our sages from a long, long time ago that will help inform work that we are doing to deal with the 21st century plague that is striking all of us. And any questions or comments or thoughts on this, on the rabbinic sources? If not, I am going to turn it over to Laurie.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm so glad to be here with you this evening. I wanted to start by taking a moment of recognition to really take in what Rabbi Joe talked about with this caring conversation, that really you're doing sacred work. And when you pick up the phone to call a congregant, you're choosing to care. Your call meets our most basic of human needs, to feel seen, heard, and that we matter. Your call not only counters the isolation, loneliness, and disconnection that so many are experiencing at this time, but also acknowledges and celebrates simchas and welcomes new members into the fold of the congregation community. So what is a caring conversation? Generally, it will be 5 to 15 minutes. I do want to say that we will have time for questions at the end. And so just, maybe jot down whatever it is that you want to bring up. Emotionally, your conversation offers a sense of connection and community building. For most, like in the 90%, for most of those you call, the feeling of being thought of and asked, how are you? Do you need something? Will be very much appreciated, and you will have a pleasant conversation. So remember that, because we're going to end up focusing on the things that you may uncover in the conversation, but those aren't going to be the rule. But that's what you'll probably need a little bit of guidance on. So the caring conversation can serve as a screening tool. As congregants feel a sense of comfort and connection in your synagogue community, personal information and challenges can emerge in the course of a caring conversation. The caller may share that they are, or a family member is going through a difficult time, facing health or financial challenge, needing help with grocery shopping, or transportation to a doctor visit. Or the person may share that they feel depressed, anxious, or lonely. Early in the pandemic, congregations found that there were many concrete needs. But at this point, 2 years in, our lives have stabilized for the most part. And now we deal with the long-term wear and tear on our minds, hearts, and souls as we begin our third year of living with the uncertainty of pandemic life. What you might find now is that people are feeling lonely, anxious, tired, weary, and sad as COVID wears on. If a congregant shares distressing information, then it is not so that you are now responsible to solve the problem. Rather, as Rabbi Joe shared, there is great relief in having the opportunity to just share one's challenges and burdens with another human being. We talk about the idea of bearing witness to someone's pain, suffering, and struggles. And to really be a listening presence is to bear witness to another human being. The caring, I'm going to say this, I'll probably say this about 3 more times. The caring conversation is not a time for you to solve others' problems. When someone shares something that they're struggling with, our natural inclination is to want to jump in and do something, but that's not what the purpose of the conversation is, and that's not what your role is. It's rather, your role is to check in, create connection, and build community, as well as whatever is defined by the committee that you're on. In doing this, though, you're opening the door for the person to say now or at a later point, I need help. As you well know, it has been a rough few years for so many reasons. Before making calls, it's essential for you to know the protocol for handling requests for help that may come as a result of making your calls. If you have an organized group headed by a committee chair, then often that's the designated person to let know of your concerns, and that individual will discern what the appropriate follow-up will be. I think Rabbi Lisa is going to talk some at the end of our call about how various needs will be handled and what are action steps to take if you have concerns about an individual you called.
Can I jump in for a second, Laurie? Is that okay? I don't want to be interrupted. I think everyone here knows it. I mean, whether you're a Hands of Chesed team member or you're generally reaching out with kindness in any number of ways. I mean, the easiest, most straightforward way is to listen and to come back to any of us in the clergy, and we will move forward. To Laurie's point, you're not there to solve problems. You can say thank you, and I'll share this with the rabbis in Cantor. Todd is on this call also, with Todd, however the comfort is, and we are fully, respectful of people's privacy, and it's for us, pastorally, we can go forward and figure out if we can help them with meals or with funds through JOF or other things like that. So it is not, the weight is not on you, as Laurie said, not to solve it, but also you can just come to us, as many of you have already done, and we'll go from there and get them to help to connect them as we can do. We can't solve it all either, but we try to do what we can.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. So some needs then are going to be handled in-house at the synagogue, and others you may find will be better served by JCFS. We have a wide range of services for social emotional support and are part of a web of social service agencies in which we can help to locate resources for your community members in need of supportive services. We will provide our website information on the resource sheet that we'll be sending out. So let's talk a bit about what distinguishes a caring conversation. And I'm not seeing on my screen, do we have a slide up?
Wait, not yet, but I was waiting for you to tell me. So here we go. Hold on a minute.
Oh, so now we're on slide 2.
Oh, okay, hold on. So sorry for the delay.
That's okay.
Okay, can you all see that?
Oh yeah, but now let me see something here. Okay.
Hold on just a minute. I have to do one thing. Does that help?
Wait a second. I'm trying to get the screen that I had up with my notes on it. Let's see. Now that's disappeared. I'm not sure what happened to that. Oh gosh.
Okay. You know what? I'm gonna try to get out of this and stop sharing.
Okay. So now we don't have the slides up?
What? Not yet. Do you have what you need?
Okay. I have what I need.
All right. So let me go back in. Hopefully this will work. What I don't know how to do is, this is slide 2. Is that what you wanted?
Yeah, that's slide 2. And let me see if I can just figure out how to get it. No. Okay. Hold on. Let me just try one more thing. Otherwise, I can actually use my. Okay. Oh, there we go. Did it. Okay.
Okay. Beautiful.
So, let's look at okay, so we're talking about the caring conversation and what distinguishes it. So take a look at the slide and look at the 3 conversations that are going on. You have different genders there, you have different races and different ages, and yet they all share so much more than the differences. And I think that what they all reflect is that communication is a whole body process. The hands, the eyes, the the eye contact, the facial expression, all reflects engagement, interest, and response to the speaker. There is a responsiveness and resonance between the two individuals. You can actually feel the emotional charge between the people in conversation. Now, you in a caring conversation will not have body language, eye contact, facial expression, or a light, kind touch to the shoulder when you're communicating on the phone. So how do you transmit the richness, the multifacetedness of communication when you're sitting on the other end of a telephone? And yet you can. You will have the words you speak and your capacity to listen. You will rely on your voice, your listening, what you say, and how you say it. It's helpful to remind yourself of your intention before you begin the calls. Recall Rabbi Joe's teaching about the significance of your actions. Your call can mean a great deal to the person you speak with. You might consider resist calling and feeling pressured to check off names on your list to complete the task. Let your intention inform your words and open your capacity for listening. I had a thought I wanted to share. Let me just think for a second. It'll come back. It'll come back to me. Okay, so some basic guidelines are, as we talk about this, you might consider that these are not just caring, these are caring conversation guidelines for anybody that you care about, family, friends, loved ones. This is these concepts, the idea of listening with, and in terms of the things, the guidelines I'm going to suggest, these are for you to use with in many ways with many relationships. So some basic guidelines are to speak clearly, speak slowly, and speak simply from a quiet environment without distractions. Our default is hearing the words being spoken and then mentally preparing our reply. Listening, however, requires hearing what is said, then understanding what you heard and processing the meaning of what you heard. So for example, you ask on the call, "How are you?" And the response is, "I'm fine, it could be worse." If you only hear those words, you might respond, "Yeah, it could always be worse." But when you listen, you might hear some heaviness in the speaker's tone that might prompt you to ask, "Oh, what do you mean by that? What is something going on for you?" So your response as the listener reflects your interest, involvement in the conversation, and an effort to understand what is being said. To listen effectively, you are there for that person, giving your full attention to the conversation. You are committing to hear what the person says without forming judgment. You resist the impulse to multitask, finish the person's sentence, interrupt and or prepare your response as the person speaks. You are present with a capital P. And this is, I'm taking also from my experience as a psychotherapist for 25 years. The art of listening is like 50% of what of the curative factor in a psychotherapeutic relationship. So it's really important. Let's see, you are present. You can model attentive listening by asking open-ended and curious questions like, "How have you been managing challenges so far?" Which is different than "How are you?" "How are you?" invites "I'm okay, everything's fine, no, pretty good." It invites that kind of a response. So you can follow up with a question that reflects you'd like to know more. What have these past few years been like for you? How have you been handling the challenges? And then, depending on what they share, you can say, well, what did you do then? Your responses indicate that you understand what the person shared and you are interested enough to want to know more. You want to think about using small vocalizations such as, oh, I see. Those all reflect that you're engaged in the conversation, you're listening, and you're tracking what is being said. The attitude is one of acceptance and non-judgment. Feeling sorry for someone struggling is not helpful, but sharing that you'll follow up to find appropriate resources for the individual is helpful. Remember, Rabbi Joe talked about humility, right? So the attitude of humility, if you think about that way of approaching another human being with a kindness and sensitivity, can be helpful. Your role is as a supportive, caring person who offers to find resources that supports an individual in need during their time of need, with a goal of offering empathic responses to what the person shares with you. So we have a cute Brene Brown YouTube video that's a few minutes long that can kind of illustrate the difference between empathy and sympathy.
I'm going to give this a try here.
Okay.
So, hold on just a second. And of course, my computer decided this was the time to cut out. So I need a minute to get back on. Hopefully, oh my goodness. Sorry about that. All right.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
And I did, and wait, I did what I was not supposed to do. There we go. Okay. Should I go back to the PowerPoint?
Rabbi Joe's going to talk now about the goals of the call.
We're going to actually talk about the call and goals of the call, and we're going to model a phone call for all of you.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I'm
No slides. No need for slides.
yeah, I'm doing that right now. There we go.
Okay. This is just Laurie and me now. Okay. Carol?
Yeah, I'm trying to get out. I'm sorry, Joe.
It's okay. I'm seeing the groups. I think it's fine.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. I want to talk about the goals of the call, of the caring conversation. There are several of them, and we're doing them in a very broad sense because each call is going to look a little bit different, and we're going to model one for you in just a moment. First goal is to make a connection. Chances are, especially in a large synagogue like North Shore Congregation Israel, you won't know the person you're calling. Now you might, and that might change the dynamic, but let's assume you won't want to make some kind of a connection. Even if you do know them, you will still want to make some kind of a connection. You will also do some screening, very informal and light touch assessing for acute needs. You want to see if there's something going on that needs attention that your committee and the synagogue and JCFS and whatever other resources are available to you might be able to help. 3, you want to offer ongoing connection. In other words, this is not a one-time thing. This call is not a one-shot thing. Assuming you have a committee, you want to keep contact with them, and it's important to ask permission. And then this is what gives the call a spiritual aspect. You want to give them a bracha. You want to give them a blessing. In longer Bikur Cholim visits, we talk about praying with the patient. We don't do this in caring conversations, but a blessing or a good wish is a way of encapsulating the call. And in fact, the best way to do it is if you can somehow include what you heard in the conversation in the blessing. If you're hearing fear or hope or anger or joy or whatever it is you're hearing, to include that in the blessing. It's a great way to finish up the conversation, and it adds a spiritual element to it. And it's important to keep in mind that during these calls, you might uncover specific needs of the people being called. And Rabbi Green referred to this earlier, especially if it's not just a routine call, but there's illness or other types of needs that are there. So you'll want to notify however you're going to work it in your team, your clergy, and certainly JCFS, the liaison, will be an important person to involve in some of these cases as well. And then you might need to talk about a plan of action if there are serious needs that need to be addressed there. Okay, so one little note, Laurie and I spent a lot of time figuring out what should be in these calls, and frankly, there's no perfect way to role model a call. We've gotten feedback that our model calls are too long. We've gotten feedback that our model calls are too short. There's no way to do the ideal model call in this type of setting. So we're doing a sample call, and we can certainly add material based on your feedback, your reactions. We'll have some time for conversation before this training is over, and you can certainly say that you might want to add certain things. But we're going to do the best we can given the time framework that we have here. Okay.
Oh, you have a question?
I have a question. Yes. Let me.
It's Lisa. It's Lisa.
Yes. Yes, Rabbi.
So I just want to name, Joe and Laurie, that what people may be feeling. I mean, you guys are professionals, right? I mean, people say that to me, right? Like, you do this, this is your day job. And there are people on here for whom this is their day job, but acknowledge that it's often very uncomfortable in your heart to say, how do I make these calls? So I want to just name that for everyone on the call, whether you're feeling or not. You may feel like, oh my gosh, what do I say? What if I say the wrong thing? Come with an open heart and an open spirit, and to Rabbi Ozarowski's comment of ending with a bracha, that could also feel like, oh my gosh. And it might be simple, may today be an easier day, or, may you get outside or find something, good in the day. It can be something really simple. You don't have to go heavy-handed, dare I say, heavy-handed rabbi. And I say that as someone who years ago, when I did chaplains, a little bit of hospital chaplaincy training, was terrified to make up my own prayers. I walked into someone's room, and my joking statistic is that Jews are the most uncomfortable with prayer. So just like be where you are and give yourself permission to go in with an open heart and do something good. Now I'm gonna let you guys model a call. Thank you.
Okay. I appreciate you mentioning those things, Rabbi Green. Those are really important points to keep in mind. The fact is, you may be uncovering some tough stuff, but you're going to be asking generalized questions. We went back and forth in the earlier versions of this training how specific questions are going to be. We decided to make them a little bit less specific, but you also listen carefully, and if you uncover certain things, you may want to talk about that a little bit more. So that's really important. You don't know what you're going to cover. It may be very routine, or it may be quite serious, or quite often something in between. So the listening is really the key to it. Rabbi Green's point about what happens at the end is also important. Not everybody is really good at offering a blessing. A blessing can be very simple as sei gesund, the Yiddish for be well. Hope you'll be okay. It can be very, very simple as long as it comes from the heart. It's got to be something that you're wishing from the heart. It will be sensed by the other person, and that's all you need, nothing more than that. It be those two words. Sei gesund is always a good one. And that's a form of prayer as well in Judaism. So ultimately, if you do this enough times, you will come up with your own script. We're going to be giving you, as part of the handout, samples of the script, but you don't need to stick to what we wrote. You come up with your own version of it, something that you're comfortable with, that works for you. We're just getting you started with some ideas for this. So points are all well taken. I appreciate you mentioning those. Okay. All right. We are going to start. Okay. Ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. Ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling.
Hello,
Hello, is this Laurie Garber-Amram?
it is.
Hi, my name is Joe Ozarowski. I'm a member of North Shore Congregation Israel, as I think you are too, but I don't think we've ever had the pleasure of meeting, have we?
No, I don't recognize your name.
I'm thank you for mentioning that. It's a large synagogue, and it's a huge synagogue actually. But I'm part of a chesed committee. Chesed is the Hebrew word for kindness, and we're reaching out to the members of our synagogue, especially in these times where we're all a bit distant from each other, just to see how people are doing and what's going on. And that's really the reason I'm calling, even though we don't know each other. I hope we'll get to know each other just a little bit. But I'm really just calling to see how you are. So let me ask you, how are you doing today?
Well, overall, I'm fine. And overall, we're managing. I think you're just catching me on a bad day. We've had to cancel a trip to Israel. I have two sons that live in Israel, and I hope I'm not sharing too much with you. I'm just really upset that we've had to cancel again, and haven't been able to see my sons in the past 2 years. And it's just, I just think I'm getting tired of all of this, to be honest. Yeah, so I'm sorry. You're probably not calling for that reason.
Actually, I am. I'm calling to find out, to see how you're doing and offer whatever support that I can and we can in the congregation to you. I'm sorry to hear about the trips to Israel, and I'm sorry to hear that it's so frustrating for you, because COVID has done such a number on so many of us. It sounds like you miss your kids in Israel.
Oh, yeah, a lot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you keep up with them in other ways, even though it's not the same thing, but are you able to do that?
Oh, yeah, we are able to talk with them on Skype, which is just really important way that we are able to see them regularly. But also, we have family in Israel, and my husband's mother is getting older, and it's just, I think this has gone on in the implications of what's come with this pandemic is just I never anticipated this. I never anticipated these kinds of things happening.
It's not what you signed up for.
No, I don't think any of us did.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's extremely frustrating not to be able to see the members of your family, not to be able to get together with them. They're far away and you want to touch them, you want to spend time with them, and you can't.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Um, how are you and the members of your family feeling? I mean, with COVID and all that, it's a question that I thought I might ask.
Oh, you mean health-wise?
Yeah, you're not. And by the way, whatever you want to share is fine with me. There's no such thing as too much sharing. It's whatever you're comfortable sharing with me.
We're in good health. That hasn't been a problem.
Mhm.
And although the interesting thing is I have a third son who lives in Phoenix, and he's come to visit, and every time he comes to visit,
Mhm.
he's flying or he'll go see friends in the city. And it's just such an odd position to be in, to be, to feel uncomfortable
Mhm.
with his visit, that I could get sick, my husband could get sick because my son's come to visit. It's just strange.
Mhm. It is
Yeah.
strange. It
Mm-hmm.
is strange.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, are there is there anything that at times when you get frustrated like this, is there anything that you lean on for hope? Any practices that you find helpful that help you to cope?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I have friends, I have, supportive husband, family. So I do have support.
Mhm.
Yeah, as I said, you just caught me at a bad moment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so sorry, and I'm not trying to intrude. Um, but part of what we're trying to do is support people, even and maybe especially in the bad moments. So I want to offer that to you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Um, it's. I'm going to ask you another question. I'm sorry if it seems too intrusive, but I'm just curious to know um, if you've ever had challenges like this in the past. Have you found ways of coping that were helpful?
Um, but I just, I mean, I think I think if we would have talked tomorrow, you would have had a different conversation with me. I just need a little bit of time to digest it. I mean, literally, this just happened. So,
Mhm.
yeah, and I think you just caught me a little bit off guard. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I'm normally, I'm a pretty good coper. I have
Mhm.
some good strategies, good
Mhm.
support. Yeah,
Mhm. It sounds like today's just been a really, really tough day for you.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, it
If,
has.
if you
I,
feel like if you feel like venting, I'll listen.
I think I already did. Thank you.
I'm glad you felt comfortable enough to vent with me. You don't even know me, but that's part of what we do in our congregation.
Mm, Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Yep.
Are there any other needs within your life, your own family around you that we might be able to be helpful for?
No, no, everything's okay. We're really managing well. Um, it's just getting long, all of these, different things that come with COVID, and it's just getting to be a long time.
It is, no
Mhm.
question, it is, and it feels long because it's hard to see an end to it, and we are stuck with it.
That's right. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's right. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for talking with me. I really appreciate the fact that you spoke to me, and I was able to have this conversation with you. And I want to just offer you my own little blessing of Sei gesund, be well. I hope tomorrow and the after tomorrow is a less frustrating day for you.
Hmm.
And I hope you get to Israel at some point soon.
Me too. Thank you so much for the call. I
Thanks so
appreciate
much
it.
for talking. Take care, Laurie.
Uh-huh. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, we're going to deconstruct the call a little bit. And I should mention that while we have scripts that we've developed, we didn't follow our scripts for this call. And Laurie and I discussed possibly just sort of winging it and playing it by ear, and both what she was going to share with me and how I was going to respond to it. But I want to just debrief the call just a little bit, and Laurie's going to pick up on some of the details. First of all, I introduced myself. That's really important. You know, when somebody calls, well, who the hell are you? So I have to tell exactly who I am and what the connection is. I wanted to try to get to know them a little bit and try to make that connection. Mostly I listened. And listen. If you don't remember anything else from this training, but if you remember to listen, then you'll have gotten the main part of what we're hoping to share with you tonight. And I tried my best to listen. I also, and since I'm a professional, I was able to use reflective listening. We don't expect you to necessarily do that unless you know how to do it already, but it's okay to respond. I tried to ask specific questions without getting too specific and making Laurie feel uncomfortable along the way. I tried to respond to her concerns and acknowledge her frustrations, since that was the major piece that she shared with me. One thing I did not do, possibly because it didn't seem like it fit into the way Laurie was presenting, but I want to note it because it will frequently come up, and we also mentioned it earlier. Both Rabbi Lisa and I and Laurie all mentioned it in one form or another, is that since we're part of an ongoing committee, that I should have asked, could I call you again sometime to see how you're doing? I didn't do that, and that was my fault, I'll own that. But we want this to be an ongoing conversation. I assume that's how you were envisioning this in one form or another. So ask permission, can I call you again in a week or 10 days or whatever you decide is the timeline for it? And then I ended the call with a blessing, a simple blessing, but I also included acknowledging the reason that she was in a bad mood today, in the hope that tomorrow would be better, and the hope that she would get to Israel, which seemed to be the main thing that was on her mind. Now, sometimes there will be things that will come up. They did not come up in our call, but there will be things that might come up that you will do some more digging to try to offer support. Sometimes when you get the sense that there are concrete needs. I asked a very generalized question. Laurie didn't respond that there were any more specific needs than the generalized question. But sometimes, especially in the time of the pandemic, people are short on food or medicine. There may be financial issues, or maybe not financial issues, but mobility issues. They can't get around. With elderly people, they may not be able to get out, or they may be afraid to get out. So if you sense there's any of that there, I did not, so I didn't go there with this call. But if you sense that, by all means, pick up on that, and then you can ask the question. Her mood was very, very clear, frustrated. I asked what she leans on for hope, and we talked about that a little bit. And then how I responded, how I attempted to respond to the answers. In the case of specific needs, it didn't come up, but if they do say that they're having financial issues, and they may not want to share that, and it's going to be kind of a tough thing, especially out in Glencoe. People may not want to share that. There may be some shame there. So do it very carefully. But the fact is, there are times for people who do need us. If it comes up that they have needs of mobility or food or medicine, you can't necessarily help them right this minute, but you will share their needs with the coordinator. If the mood has been consistently low, which was not the case in our conversation, Laurie acknowledged it's just a day and tomorrow I'll be better, hopefully. We don't know that for sure, but that was what she said. But if they don't seem to have a sense of hope or faith, you can always ask them some of the questions about what has worked in the past, how they've been spending their time, and see if there isn't something else, mental health issue, that we might be able to be helpful, or your committee might be able to be helpful. Ask if you can share it with the coordinator. That's where JCFS might come in, because we're a Jewish mental health agency. That's some of what we directly offer. And then you can report back that to your coordinators to follow what can happen. That's how we're deconstructing this call. We'll have some time for further conversation. And now I'm going to turn it back to Laurie.
Thank you. Carol, we're on the slide 5.
Okay, I may have passed it. I don't know that I can get back to it. So I'll do what I can. And if not, please forgive me.
Oh, of course. So you'll just let me know.
Okay, where are we? Are we at 5?
Yeah, on 5, hold on, now I have to, okay, there we go. Okay, so let's think about this, the model call. Again, this isn't necessarily typical. It was a call. I think this would be a hard call for anyone to make and be the caller. Let's consider how Rabbi Joe handled it. And this is, these are the key things. You get you have a difficult call, and you can agree with the person. That I said, oh, this is so hard. You say to the person, yeah, this is so hard. And by doing that, you make the speaker feel heard, which is what Rabbi Joe's responses to me made me feel like he heard me, and he understood by reflecting back what I said. So if you're listening, that becomes easier to do because you use either the very same words the person said to you, like, I'm really struggling, and you say, I hear that you're struggling, so depending on the context, I hear that you're struggling, and I'd like your permission to bring this back to clergy because maybe there are some resources that we can locate for you. So again, that's what you have to offer is listening and showing them that you heard them and that you'll bring this back to the appropriate place, and we can figure out if there are other resources to support you at this time. So if someone's shares they're lonely and depressed or anxious, stressed or frustrated, you'll discern from what the callee is sharing if that individual might benefit from assistance. Sometimes we just need to vent, and we're just saying, oh, this is horrible. I'm getting tired of COVID. But other times your intuition will tell you that this person is struggling. There just feels like there's a little bit too much going on. And at such moments, you may feel uneasy because it's a lot of responsibility to have that shared with you and to feel like you have to respond in a certain way. But in these moments, you want to take a deep breath and steady yourself, and then share that you understand. I understand that you can say that. Yes, this is really a difficult time. You can ask how they managed difficult situations in the past. What strengths have they relied on? And again, it has to be within your comfort zone. This is a responsibility. And remember, just listening and, saying, showing that you're with them, bringing your presence, that's enough. That's all you have to do. This is kind of above and beyond. These strategies, these comments are above and beyond, and they're only if you feel comfortable with them. You might ask if the callee has a support system, family, friends, other community members, or community supports. And if they do, would they like additional support? If they are open to additional resources, then you can ask their permission to get back to them with some suggestions and resources within the week. I think one of the things I like about what Rabbi Joe does is that as much as I shared, his touch is very light. He responds, but he never comes in the ditches with me like, oh, yes, it is a really hard time. He just stays kind of light and above my inner turmoil. Okay, so you're going to bring the concern or the need to have whoever is designated as a point person in your congregation And Rabbi Green indicated that that's clergy. Okay, slide 6, please.
It's up.
Oh, thank you. So just to kind of sum up, is the keys of a caring conversation are patient listening. We resist interrupting or jumping in with a premature response. You respond with listening sounds to show that you're tracking the conversation. Yes, mm-hmm. Empathy, you may imagine what the person on the other end of the line might be feeling. They might be lonely, helpless, powerless, feeling afraid or fear. The most supportive attitude you can adopt is one of acceptance and non-judgment, definitely not pity or sympathy. Your curious questions enable the person you're calling to feel that you're interested in them and engaged in the conversation. If an individual shares challenge or struggle, you empathize by letting them know that, yes, you understand this is a difficult time. You reflect what you heard the person say. Again, kind of what they say to you, you say back to them. You're feeling anxious and you're not sleeping well. The situation is very stressful. You affirm your commitment to locate resources to assist them at this time by saying something like, I'd like to see what resources are available to support you at this time. And I want to remind you again that mostly your conversations are not going to be these kind of conversations. But you have to be prepared for if they are. Self-awareness. It's important for you to monitor your own feelings if you're stirred up or agitated by a particular person, and you may very well be. You may have someone that's like suspicious of why you're calling them. Why are you calling me? Who are you? So that may be stirring for you. Alternatively, you may be tempted to go above and beyond for someone who you like, right? So if you're having feelings that interfere with your patient listening and empathy, pay attention, breathe to let yourself ground and clear your head, and then put aside your feelings until you can think more deeply about them after the call. And slide 7 is our last slide. This is caring for yourself. So if you're on this call, you're a doer, tending to and caring for others. This generosity, your generosity and willingness to help is a gift to our community, to your community. But helpers and doers are also going through the challenges and difficulties of COVID, and it's essential that you make time for self-care, which is not selfish, but rather it's a responsibility to the others that we support. Stephen Covey, in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, wrote about prioritizing our priorities to include activities that energize and revitalize us. While Viktor Frankl wrote about the absolute importance of the role purpose plays in living our best lives. So as we prioritize our needs with meeting the needs of others, we'll have a synergistic effect. As we care for ourselves in meaningful ways, we increase our capacity to show up in caring ways for others. So do take care of yourself, and I wish you much joy and meaning in the work you do for your communities.